I took the job because I liked places after everyone else had finished using them. That sounds stranger than I mean it to. I don't mean abandoned places or ruined places or anything dramatic like that. I just mean the quiet that settles over ordinary public spaces when the useful part of the day is over. Bus stations after the last commuter rush. Grocery stores while the floor is being mopped. Parking garages at midnight when every sound has room around it. There has always been something restful to me about standing in a place built for crowds and hearing only your own steps. So when I found out the old mall off Highway 99 needed someone for the closing shift, I took the job without much hesitation. At the time, I was 28 and living in a stucco apartment in a hot little California city that sat somewhere between suburbs and farmland. It was one of those places where the summers bleached the sidewalks and the winters were mild until fog drifted in and made everything feel temporary. I had been bouncing between retail work and warehouse temp jobs for a couple of years, never hating any of it exactly, but never wanting to stay either. The mall felt different right away. It was called Valley Crown Mall, though nobody under 50 seemed to use the full name anymore. Most people just called it the mall, even though by then it was hardly the center of anything. It had been built in the late 80s and had probably been impressive once. You could still see that in the shape of it. Big skylights, wide polished corridors, see 2 levels around a central court. A drained decorative fountain with blue tile and fake stone edging. An old food court with a raised planter full of dusty artificial palms. Brass railings, pale square tiles that held echoes for a long time after footsteps passed. When I started there, maybe a third of the storefronts were empty. Some were neatly covered in printed vinyl with optimistic words about future leasing. Others were just dark behind the gates, with old shelving still visible if you looked from the right angle. A shoe store remained, a discount cosmetics place, a phone case kiosk, a pretzel stand that always smelled better than it deserved to, 2 clothing chains, a nail salon, a toy store hanging on for reasons I still don't understand, and 1 anchor department store at the north end that felt permanently tired no matter how brightly they lit the display windows. The second anchor space had been empty for years. Everyone still referred to that stretch as the West Wing, though there wasn't much left there besides shuttered units, a dead escalator, and a long corridor of reflected light from the skylights overhead. During the day, it made the whole mall feel bigger than it actually was. At night, it made the place seem patient. I liked that. The job itself was simple. I wasn't security exactly, though security was part of it. I worked for mall operations, which mostly meant I was the person still moving around after the stores wanted to stop thinking. I checked that gates were down, made sure service doors were locked, did the closing walk, helped the cleaning crew if they needed supplies or keys, handled the small practical things that come with a building emptying itself. Lights, music, forgotten bags, turned over chairs, alarm panels, delivery notes left too late. Store managers who swore they'd locked up and then hadn't. Most evenings I came in around 4:30. The mall still had some life then. Older people walking laps before dinner. Teenagers drifting toward the arcade that had somehow survived near the food court. Parents buying 1 pair of shoes and pretending they were not exhausted. Little kids pressing both hands against the rail to watch the lower-level lights. The air held that familiar mall mix of perfume, pretzels, floor wax, and recycled cool air that made every season feel slightly artificial. So I'd clock in at the service office behind the management suite, pour coffee that was always too burnt by then, check the operations log, and do the first walk before the dinner crowd faded. The office was down a hallway most shoppers never noticed. Gray carpet, bulletin board, metal desk, lockers, a cheap microwave, emergency binders, old leasing maps, a little radio charging dock for the store managers who still bothered to sign them out. There was a faint smell of paper, old carpet glue, and air conditioning that had been running continuously since the Clinton administration. That was also where I got the rules. On my second shift, the senior night supervisor, a man named Eddie Salazar, handed me a laminated card and said very casually, "Keep this in your pocket after 9. Eddie had worked there so long that he looked as if he belonged to the building. Not in any uncanny sense, just in the way some people fit old institutions by shape and patience. He was broad-shouldered, soft-spoken, and never in a hurry unless the roof was leaking or a real emergency was underway. He had a tired mustache and the kind of careful walk that suggested old knee pain and long years on hard floors. I read the card while he stood by the coffee pot. At the top, it said, "Closing rules, night shift." Then underneath were 5 lines. 1. Make the first closing announcement from the fountain, not the office. 2. If anyone asks for a store that's been gone a long time, don't correct them. Point them to the south doors and say they just closed for the night. 3. Sure to never answer the white courtesy phone by the children's play area after 9:30. 4. If gate 32 in the west wing is raised, pull it down from the side. Don't look under it. 5. On the final food court sweep, if someone is sitting with shopping bags and no food, ask only, "Did you find your ride?" If they say no, start the closing announcement again from the fountain. I read it twice. Then I looked up at Eddie and asked if this was some kind of joke for new hires. He shook his head. "No." "What's gate 32? "Old photo store." "Why can't I answer a phone?" "Because it's easier not to." That was all he gave me. And because it was only my second shift, and because old buildings collect odd customs the way carpet collects dust, I didn't press too hard. Every workplace has things that make no sense until you've been there long enough not to ask anymore. Don't lean on that freezer door. Don't use the West Register if it's raining. Don't prop open the stockroom after 5. I assumed the closing rules belonged to that same category. So I put the card in my back pocket and got on with the night. For the first week, the job was exactly what I had hoped. Closing time in a nearly empty mall has a gentle rhythm to it. The shops begin pulling their gates while music still plays overhead. The brighter stores stay bright, and the tired ones get tired faster. Employees come out carrying little knot-backed trash bags or cups of pretzel lemonade and say goodnight without looking at you too closely. The final shoppers move with less purpose than they had earlier. There's always somebody still comparing shirts at 8:58, as if the store will stay open because they personally are indecisive. At 9, I'd start the first walk. Radio on my shoulder, key ring clipped at my belt, little flashlight in my pocket, though I rarely needed it. I knew which stores shut exactly on time, and which ones liked to drift 5 or 10 minutes late. The shoe store manager always did one final mirror check before turning his key. The cosmetics girls giggled through the whole close, no matter how tired they looked. The pretzel stand took forever to clean the warmer trays. The arcade boy dimmed half the lights before he finished counting tokens, which always made that corner of the mall feel like the end of a movie. And at 9:15, I made the announcement. The first rule had seemed the least strange to me. Make the first closing announcement from the fountain, not the office. That one could almost pass for a practical preference. The office PA system was old and tinny, and the center court carried a human voice better than the speakers did. So I would stand beside the dry fountain, just where the tiles changed color, raise the handheld mic, and say the same thing every night. Good evening, Valley Crown shoppers. The time is now 9:15, and the mall will be closing soon. Please make your final purchases and begin moving toward the exits. Thank you, and have a safe drive home. Simple enough. The words became part of me quickly. There is a comfort in repeated phrasing when you work nights. The mouth learns it, and the mind gets to go a little soft around the edges. Most nights, that first announcement was the beginning of the mall loosening its grip on the day. People started walking faster. Gates came down. The cleaners rolled out their yellow carts. The air seemed to thin. And that would have been the whole job, really, if not for the things that happened after the music stopped. The first odd thing was so small I almost missed it. It was near the old directory on the lower level, maybe 20 minutes after closing. The mall music had shut off, which always made the building seem suddenly older. I was walking toward the west wing to check the empty units when a woman stepped out from near the rail and asked me where the pet store had moved. Not where it was, where it had moved. She was maybe in her 50s, well-dressed in a soft tan coat, carrying a glossy paper shopping bag I didn't recognize right away. Her voice was calm and polite in the way older shoppers often are when they already expect employees to be slightly incompetent. I almost answered honestly. There hadn't been a pet store in Valley Crown for years, as far as I knew. Not since before I started. Maybe before Eddie, too. Then I remembered Rule 2. If anyone asks for a store that's been gone a long time, don't correct them. Point them to the south doors and say they just closed for the night. So I did. They just closed for the night, I told her. South doors are this way. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Oh, she said. Of course. Then she turned and walked toward the south exit without another word. That would not have stayed with me, except as she moved away, I finally recognized the logo on the bag. It was from Mervyn's. Not just an old style. The actual old Mervyn's logo. Big blue lettering on white paper with a red bar under it. I had not seen one of those since I was a kid. I stood there for a moment, watching her disappear past the benches. Then I laughed at myself, because what else was I supposed to do? Vintage bag, eccentric lady, late hour. Malls attract that sort of thing. I finished the wing check and forgot about it for the rest of the shift. 2 nights later, I heard the courtesy phone ring. The phone sat on a small column near the children's play area between the toy store and the old candy kiosk. It was one of those white wall phones malls used to have before everyone had a cell phone, mostly for parents. Quick pages, on or calling the office if the front desk was unattended. Hardly anyone used it anymore. Half the time I forgot it was even connected. At 9:42, long after the last family had left the play area, it rang once. Then again, then a third time. I was already halfway toward it before I remembered Rule 3. Never answer the white courtesy phone by the children's play area after 9:30. I stopped maybe 6 feet away and listened. The phone gave one more ring, then it went quiet. The play area itself was empty. Foam blocks stacked. Little plastic tunnel wiped down and dark. The surrounding storefront gates closed. No one standing nearby waiting for help. No footsteps. No voice calling out. I stayed there another 10 seconds, maybe more. Then I turned and walked away. Later, when I passed by again on the upper level, the receiver was back in its cradle exactly where it belonged. I told myself the line had glitched. I told myself a lot of practical things in those first weeks. That is one of the comforts of an ordinary job. Practical explanations are always lying around ready to be used. The third thing was harder to shrug off. It involved Gate 32. Unit 32 had once been a photo studio or photo processing place, depending on who you asked. By the time I came to Valley Crown, it had long since been stripped down to bare walls and a dusty counter, then forgotten behind a metal gate in the west wing. Nothing around it was open anymore except one candle store holding on by stubbornness and holiday traffic. One Thursday night, just after 10, I turned into the west wing and saw that Gate 32 was raised about 2 feet off the floor. Not much, just enough to notice. I knew for a fact it had been shut when I did my first round. The chain lock still hung on the side track, but the bottom bar had been pulled up in a smooth curve as if someone had lifted it from inside. Rule 4 came back to me then. If Gate 32 in the west wing is raised, pull it down from the side. Don't look under it. Again, that was such a specific instruction that it almost made me smile. Still, I followed it. I stepped to the side, kept my body angled away from the opening, more out of obedience than fear, took hold of the bottom bar, and pulled. The gate rattled softly on its tracks and settled back into place. From inside the unit, just before the metal touched tile, I heard the delicate rolling sound of something small crossing a hard floor, like a loose spool, or a wheel from an old office chair. Or maybe the plastic roller of one of those film canister carts they used to use in Photoshops years ago. I let go of the gate and stood very still. The sound didn't come again. Neither did I hear breathing, movement, or anything else I could properly call unusual. Just the hum of the West Wing emergency lights and the distant whine of a floor machine from the upper level. I finished my check without looking under the gate. Afterward, in the office, I asked Eddie how long those rules had been around. He was filling out a cleaning supply order with one hand and eating almonds from a little zip bag with the other. "Long time," he said. "Since before you?" "Yes." "What happens if you don't follow them?" He looked up then, not irritated exactly, but mildly disappointed in me for asking in a way he seemed to consider wasteful. "Closing takes longer," he said. That answer sounds absurd when repeated now, but in the mall, in that job, it felt precise. Closing takes longer. Not danger, not curse, not punishment. Just delay. Friction. The building failing to settle in the right order. I thought about that a lot. There is something eerie in the idea that the worst outcome is not death or madness, but simply that the place refuses to finish becoming empty. The pattern built from there. Not every night. That would have made it easier to dismiss as some scheduled disturbance. The strange things came only often enough that I never stopped feeling caught slightly off guard by them. An older man in a windbreaker asking where Walden Books had moved, though the nearest bookstore left years before. A teenage girl standing at the upper railing with 2 glossy department store bags from chains I remembered from childhood, staring down at the dark fountain with the patient look of someone waiting for companions who were already late. The white courtesy phone ringing after the music stopped, always near the play area, always unanswered if I had any sense. A faint, sweet chemical smell near Gate 32 that reminded me of old photo paper or developing solution, though I doubt I'd actually smelled either since middle school. And then there were the food court sitters. Rule 5 seemed the strangest to me from the beginning. On the final food court sweep, if someone is sitting with shopping bags and no food, ask only, "Did you find your ride?" If they say no, start the closing announcement again from the fountain. It took almost a month before I met one. She was sitting alone at a table near the empty Chinese place, under the dead menu board. 2 shopping bags at her feet. No tray, no drink, no phone in her hands. just sitting upright with her hands folded, like a person waiting to be collected after a long day out. The food court was otherwise empty. Every gate was down. Even the pretzel stand lights were off. I walked up slowly and asked exactly what the card told me to ask. "Did you find your ride?" She looked at me with mild surprise, as if I had interrupted a thought. Then she said, "No, not yet." Her voice was low, tired, and perfectly ordinary, so I did what the rule said. I went back to the fountain and made the closing announcement again. "Good evening, Valley Crown shoppers. The time is now 9:15 and the mall will be closing soon. Please make your final purchases and begin moving toward the exits. Thank you, and have a safe drive home." The time was not 9:15. It was almost 10:30. But I read it exactly as written because that was how the card had it phrased. When I returned to the food court, the woman was gone. No scraping chair. No footsteps heard leaving. No shopping bags on the tile. Just the empty table and the mall's tired lights reflected in the plastic menu boards above the closed counters. That was the first time I felt something stronger than curiosity. Not panic. More a kind of quiet, moral discomfort. Because now I had participated. Not observed, not redirected, not politely sent someone to the wrong door. I had repeated a line I knew was false in order to make a person disappear from an empty food court. It is a strange thing to realize that your job may contain a ritual before you have decided whether you believe in rituals. I started asking more questions after that. Not dramatic ones. Just the sort of tired, sideways questions you ask co-workers when you're trying not to sound foolish. I asked Marisol from the cleaning crew whether she had ever seen people still shopping after close. She shrugged and said sometimes the mall took a while to agree it was done. I asked Vince, one of the contract security guys, whether he answered the courtesy phone. He laughed once without humor and said he liked keeping his shift simple. I asked Eddie what the south doors were for, specifically. "Leaving," he said. "For who?" He looked at me a moment. "Whoever still thinks they're here." That was probably the clearest answer anybody ever gave me. By then, I had come to understand something important about Valley Crown. The building was not angry. It was not hunting anyone. If anything, the whole problem had the texture of habit rather than malice. The mall had been open too many years, had held too many Saturdays, too many parents and children and teenagers and tired workers and holiday crowds and last-minute errands and waiting rides and forgotten pickups. And when the place got quiet enough, some of those patterns seemed unwilling to end cleanly. That was how I began thinking about it anyway. Not ghosts. Not exactly memories either. More like the last half hour of certain old days had not fully finished fading out. That idea made the place easier to work in. It may also have made me too comfortable. The personal involvement started because of a boy in a red jacket. I saw him first on a Wednesday in November, just before the first announcement. He couldn't have been more than 10 or 11. He was leaning over the lower-level rail near the old coin fountain, looking down toward the dark water basin, as if he expected coins to still be glittering there. He wore a red windbreaker with gray stripes down the sleeves, the kind people used to buy kids for school in the 90s, and white sneakers gone slightly dull with use. Nothing about that is impossible. Children still came to the mall sometimes, especially in the early evening. But this one was alone, and more to the point. He was still there after the toy store shut its gate, after the food court dimmed, after the music ended. I was halfway across the upper level when he called up to me. "Hey," he said, "do you know if the pet store still has rabbits?" That stopped me, because it was not only the question from Rule 2. It was the exact kind of store someone had asked after before. I went down the escalator and stopped at a polite distance. "They just closed for the night," I said. "South doors are this way." He looked mildly disappointed but not confused. "My mom said we could go after Sears," he said. There had not been a Sears there in a very long time. "Not tonight," I said gently. "South doors." He nodded once. Then he walked away across the center court and out of sight behind one of the empty kiosks. I never saw him reach the doors. That bothered me. Not in the sharp way, but in the lingering way. It is one thing to repeat a line to a middle-aged woman carrying an old bag. Another thing entirely to say it to a child. 2 nights later, the white courtesy phone rang while I was near the play area. I stopped again, as I always had. The phone rang 4 times this time, not 3. Then, just as it went quiet, I heard a voice over the old intercom speaker mounted near the ceiling. Not a page exactly. More like the tail end of a page, too soft to be fully clear. "Tommy, stay by the fountain." The sound crackled and died. I stood there listening to the empty corridor. The play area foam tunnel gleamed softly under the nightlights. The toy store gate beyond it was locked. When a poster for a Christmas photo package from some past season still curled in one corner of the bulletin board because no one had bothered to remove it fully. I did not answer the phone. I did not search for Tommy. But I thought about the boy in the red jacket the rest of the night. By then, the mall had become a very particular kind of quiet for me. I knew the timing of the cleaning machines, the soft clack of certain gates, the low electric buzz from the vending alcove near the restrooms. The strange things stood out precisely because the rest of the place had become so familiar. They were not dramatic, just out of rhythm. And rhythm matters more than people realize in buildings. By December, holiday decorations had gone up in the saddest possible way. Not lavishly, but just enough to suggest that management still believed in appearances. Plastic garlands wound around the upper rail. A tired artificial tree near the fountain with white lights and too little ornament. Red bows fixed high on the light poles. The mall looked less festive than determined. Holiday traffic brought more people in the evenings, which meant the close got messier. More families, more strollers, more last-minute gift panic. More teenagers using the warmth without buying much. For 2 weeks, I almost forgot the rules because there were too many ordinary tasks in front of them. Lost wallet, spilled soda, fussy child, door alarm, store manager needs a key, delivery driver in the wrong dock. Then, on the last Thursday before Christmas, everything folded together. It had rained all day. A light, cold rain that made the parking lot shine black under the lot lamps. By 9, the crowd had thinned to almost nothing. The toy store shut late. The pretzel stand ran out of dough. A jewelry kiosk left their shutters half-latched, and I had to call them back from the lot. Eddie went home sick around 8:30, leaving me with Vince from security, who preferred to sit in the camera room unless something physically forced him into motion. At 9:15, I made the first announcement from the fountain. My voice sounded small in the holiday lights. By 9:35, the music stopped. At 9:38, the courtesy phone rang. At 9:41, gate 32 in the west wing was raised nearly 3 feet. And at 9:44, I saw the boy in the red jacket again. This time walking slowly along the upper level with a leash in his hand and no dog attached to it. I should have followed the rules exactly and nothing more. I know that now. Instead, because it was Christmas week, because the rain made everyone seem more stranded than they really were, because children and empty malls are a poor combination for the conscience, I made a decision that felt human and turned out to be unwise. I picked up the courtesy phone. Not on the fourth ring. On the next one, when it started again after a long pause. The receiver was cool in my hand. For a second, there was only the faint hiss of an open line. Then a woman's voice, soft and tired and too close, said, "If you see Tommy, tell him not to go near the pictures. I'm getting the car." I did not answer. The line went dead anyway. I put the phone back so carefully you would have thought I was returning something fragile to a shelf. Then I went toward the West Wing. Not running, not panicking. Just walking with a purpose I knew, even then, I had no business having. The West Wing was darker than the rest of the mall because half the ceiling fixtures had been shut off to save money. Holiday garland hung there too, but the bows looked dim and out of place against the closed gates. Gate 32 was still up, the opening black beneath it. The chemical smell was stronger than before, mixed now with something else. Dust, maybe. Or old carpet that had been wet once and dried wrong. I stopped beside the gate. From somewhere beyond it came a sound I recognized at once. Not a child crying, not footsteps. The dry, automatic flutter of photo prints being dropped into a tray. If you're old enough to remember 1-hour photo counters, you know the sound. Light, papery, slightly curled. The sound of somebody's holiday snapshots becoming real. I did not kneel. That much I still got right. Instead, I stood very still and listened. Then, from farther down the wing, I heard the soft slap of sneakers on tile. The boy in the red jacket was walking away from me toward the dead anchor store at the end, leash still trailing from one hand. "Hey," I said before I could stop myself. He turned halfway, not frightened, not even surprised. "Did they call my mom?" he asked. There are moments when a building stops feeling like a workplace and starts feeling like a conversation you arrived halfway through. That was one of them. I should have told him the line I had been given. South doors. They just closed for the night. Easy. Clean. The kind of phrase that seemed to move everything along without making new trouble. Instead, I said, "She's getting the car." That was the wrong thing. Not obviously, not dramatically, but wrong in the way certain keys are wrong for certain locks. It fit too closely. It answered rather than redirected. The boy nodded. Then he said, "She always says to wait by the pictures." And he turned toward gate 32. That was the moment I finally understood what Eddie had meant when he said closing takes longer. Because after I answered him that way, the mall around us changed almost imperceptibly, but enough. The West Wing became brighter. Not brightly lit. Just brighter than it should have been, as if half the ceiling fixtures that were usually dead had come weakly back to life. The reflected tiles took on a warmer tint. Somewhere behind me, far off, I heard what sounded like the food court fryer vent kicking on. Then came the low, metallic shudder of a storefront grill rising, somewhere I couldn't place. Not chaos. Not a haunting in the theatrical sense. Just the sound of a building reconsidering whether it had actually closed. I said his name before I realized I shouldn't know it. "Tommy." He paused by the gate and looked back. Then the leash in his hand tightened as if something at the other end had pulled gently once. No dog appeared. The leash simply angled into the dark beneath the grill. He smiled faintly. "He found it," he said. I don't know what would have happened if I had gone closer. That uncertainty is still one of the heavier parts of the memory. What I do know is that the fifth rule came back to me then with sudden force. On the final food court sweep, If someone is sitting with shopping bags and no food, ask only, "Did you find your ride?" If they say no, start the closing announcement again from the fountain. It was the only rule that told me what to do when things had already drifted too far. So I backed away from the wing, not turning my back fully, not hurrying either. Just stepping back until I was clear of gate 32 and then walking as steadily as I could towards center court. The mall was not empty anymore. That is the plainest way I can say it. It was not crowded, nothing loud or rushing. But as I crossed the upper level, I became aware, in the same peripheral way one notices reflections before faces, that there were more people than there should have been. And a woman near the dead arcade holding 2 shopping bags and looking at the shutter as if it might reopen. A man in a green mall walker jacket standing by the directory with both hands on the rail. A teenage couple at the far edge of the food court sharing a tray that held nothing visible. A little girl in white socks sitting on the rim of the dry fountain with a balloon string wrapped twice around her wrist, though there was no balloon at the end of it. No one shouted. No one chased me. Most of them barely seemed to notice I was there, and that, more than anything, kept me calm. The place did not feel violent. It felt unfinished. I reached the fountain, took the mic from my belt, and made the announcement again. Exactly as before. Same tone, same wording, same false time. Good evening, Valley Crown shoppers. The time is now 9:15, and the mall will be closing soon. Please make your final purchases and begin moving toward the exits. Thank you, and have a safe drive home. The sound carried out through the center court. For a second, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the small half-presences of the place seemed to loosen. The man at the rail turned and walked toward the south doors. The teenage couple stood without haste and drifted away down the lower corridor. The little girl on the fountain edge slid down and vanished behind a pillar before I could properly see where she went. By the time the last word of the announcement had died away, the mall felt dimmer again. Older. Closed. I made the announcement a second time for good measure. When I returned to the West Wing, gate 32 was shut. The chemical smell had thinned to almost nothing. The boy in the red jacket was gone. On the tile near the gate, though, I found one single glossy photo print curled at the edge from damp air. I picked it up before I thought better of it. The image had faded badly, and the colors were the wrong soft shades old prints get when they've been in heat too long. But I could still tell what it showed. A woman kneeling beside a boy in a red jacket and a golden-colored dog, all three smiling in front of the Christmas tree that had once stood in the center court of Valley Crown Mall. The date stamped in the corner was from 1997. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I slipped it into my jacket pocket and went to finish the close. Vince finally emerged from security long enough to help with the outer doors, though he noticed nothing unusual beyond the fact that I looked pale and distracted. I didn't tell him much, just that the West Wing had been off and I'd done a second announcement. He nodded like a man hearing that the mop closet needed restocking. That, too, was part of the mall's character. It did not reward dramatics. If something happened, you folded it into the shift and kept moving. The quiet aftermath was almost worse than the event itself. I went home after sunrise and slept badly. When I woke in the afternoon, the photo print was still in my jacket pocket. I put it on the kitchen table, made coffee, and looked at it in daylight. It remained just as ordinary and just as impossible as before. I brought it to Eddie that evening. He took it from me, studied it without visible surprise, and said, "You answered the phone?" It wasn't a question. "Yes." He nodded once and handed the photo back. Don't do that again. That's all? He looked toward the mall corridor beyond the office door. What do you want me to say? I want to know what this is. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, people miss places they thought they'd have longer. That was not an explanation, but it was closer to one than anything I had gotten before. He told me the photo studio in 32 used to do holiday portraits every December. People lined up for them. Pets too sometimes. The pet store had been 3 units down in those years. Mervyn's had been one of the anchors. The courtesy phones mattered because people actually used them. Parents really did page children. Children really did wait by fountains. People really did say they were just getting the car. And closing? I asked. Eddie rubbed his jaw slowly. Closing is when a place notices who hasn't left yet. That stayed with me. I worked at Valley Crown another 6 months, long enough to learn that I could still do the job if I kept my part of it small. I followed the rules exactly after that. I never answered the courtesy phone again. I never corrected anyone asking for a vanished store. If Gate 32 was raised, I shut it from the side. If someone sat in the food court with bags and no food, I asked the ride question, and if needed, walked back to the fountain and started the close again. And the mall, in return, remained manageable. Not normal. I don't think it ever truly was after midnight, but manageable. That is what people often misunderstand about unsettling places. They imagine you either flee them or are destroyed by them. Most of the time, if the thing is subtle enough, you simply learn the terms under which ordinary life can continue. Still, something in me had shifted. Before the boy in the red jacket, the mall had felt quiet. After him, it felt crowded in a very specific, hidden way. Not every corridor, not every night. But enough that when I walked past the center court tree at Christmas or the shuttered toy store in spring, I no longer felt alone simply because I could count no one visible nearby. I had become aware of the possibility of leftover company, and once you know a thing like that, you never get the first innocence back. I left when the North Anchor store finally pulled out and half the lower level went dark for good. Officially, it was because the hours were changing and the pay wasn't worth the drive. That was true. But I was also ready to stop being the person who told the building it was time to empty itself. A year later, part of Valley Crown was converted into offices and a discount gym. The fountain was removed. The play area disappeared. Gate 32, I heard, was knocked out to make space for a seasonal furniture outlet that failed within one summer. People said the mall looked better. Maybe it did. Cleaner, brighter, less sad. But when I drove past once, not long after the remodel started, I parked for a minute at the far edge of the lot and looked in through the south glass. It was early evening, not close yet, and shoppers still moved through the lower level with bags and food cups and tired faces. Ordinary people. Current people. The kind a mall is built for. Even so, I found myself watching the fountain area out of habit, forgetting for a second that the fountain was gone. That's the thing I still think about sometimes. Not the phone, though I remember the voice clearly. Not Gate 32, though I can still hear the soft roll across the floor behind it. What I think about is closing time itself, how gentle it can seem from the outside. Lights lowering, gates coming down. Final announcements. A building settling into dark. It feels simple when you're young, as if places shut the way boxes shut, cleanly and once. But I don't think that's true anymore. Not for every place. Some buildings hold on to their last useful hour longer than others. Some don't know what to do with all the unfinished waiting inside them. And if enough years of that gather in one place, I think the residue of it can begin to act almost like habit. A boy still looking for the pet store, a woman still getting the car, somebody still waiting at a food court table with no food in front of them, because the stores, surely, aren't quite done yet. I don't go to malls much now. Most of the ones near me have been carved into other things anyway. Clinics, discount gyms, warehouse churches, storage space, county offices. But once in a while, usually around the holidays, I'll end up in one late in the evening and hear the first closing announcement drift across tile. And every single time, without thinking, I look toward the nearest fountain or its empty place, just to see who hasn't started leaving yet.